must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their fathers have slowly gone by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them and sigh, and know they love you. Now, you may be wondering why I chose to open my Devar Torah this evening with an excerpt from this song by Graham Nash. Well, besides being one of my favorites, it actually has an important connection to this week's Torah portion, called Shoftim. Shoftim opens with the command from God that, quote, "You shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, throughout your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgments." The Torah then continues with a command that the people, as well as these newly appointed judges and officers, shall not pervert just judgment. You shall not respect one person over another, nor take bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. And then it continues with the famous words, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, only justice shall you pursue. So the question that came to my mind was, where do responsible judges and officers come from? And how are they trained? Well, of course, the obvious answer is law school. But I wanted to start earlier than that. I think the Torah, in its broader sense, would say, from our children. That's where the lyrics to the song by Graham Nash comes into the picture. In contemporary music, we would say, teach your children. In Jewish circles, we would add to that instruction quotes from Jewish sources that reaffirms this all-important command. We would quote first from the book of Deuteronomy, the same words we chanted together earlier this evening at tonight's service by saying, "V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam," and you shall teach them diligently to your children. I suspect where Graham Nash got the title of the song. But we could also quote from the book of Proverbs by saying, "Train a child up in the way he or she ought to go, and they will not swerve from it even in old age." Well, there are so many other sources that I could bring into the discussion, but I think you get the idea. So, I think the value of teaching our children well in order to raise up the next generation of judges and officers, the next generation of leaders, is one that we all can agree on. It is the foundation upon which we rest the future of society. But how have we measured up in this? Well, when I look to our own community, I have mixed feelings. I am eternally hopeful when I see the results of the latest TCAP scores for Shelby County and Memphis City schools. According to a recent editorial by a staff reporter of the Commercial Appeal, quote, "The latest Tennessee Comprehensive Assessment Program," I had to write that out because I couldn't remember what TCAP stood for, "scores were released, and the rise of this writing, Thursday, which was July 26th, and they show the state's public school students made record gains this year." Well, the article continues. The news was particularly good for Memphis and Shelby County. Shelby County school students outpaced state gains in all 4 subjects tested in grades 3 through 8, math, reading, social studies, and science. Memphis City school students made gains in every subject except math, posting a 4.3% gain in that subject against a 6.2% average gain statewide. While the overall gains in Memphis were not as impressive as those in the county, the article continues, the progress made shows that the reforms underway in both school systems, in partnership with the federal and state departments of education and private foundations, are working. Well, all of this leads me to see a bright brighter future for our children in spite of all the turmoil surrounding such questions as school consolidation and teacher qualifications and student readiness. However, I am deeply troubled by the reality that, according to the latest statistics from the Urban Child Institute, over 40% of the children of elementary school age in the city of Memphis live in poverty. Now, when you look closer in the report at the number of children living in unmarried households, the number jumps to 83%. Now, why is this a concern? Well, according to the Urban Child Institute, the report says children in single-parent and unmarried parent families are more likely to be poor, whether they live in Memphis or in suburban Shelby County. Poverty, along with low social support and high levels of parental stress, places these children at risk for behavioral problems and reduced cognitive outcomes. So what can be done? Well, I think a lot has already been done, such as improving the TCAP scores. I also applaud the efforts of our past president of our congregation, Billy Orgel, and others in leadership who have been struggling with this problem. But with as much work as these people are doing, we have a role to play as well. I'm reminded of that proverb from the folk wisdom of the Nigerian people that says, "It takes a whole village to raise a child." Each of us must be an integral part of the village, and each of us has an important role to play in raising not just our children, but all of the children in our village. Well, up to this point, I've been talking about the cognitive training of our children, the results of what they are learning. Well, as important as this is, I think we are leaving something out of equal, if not greater value, for fear of perhaps violating laws of separation of church and state. I think the discussion must include the ethical guidance that our children need in order to live moral lives, lives that, as our Torah portion states, will lead them to pursue justice when they are grown. Today, the tragic reality is that our children are more likely to have their moral code fashioned by what they learn on the streets than what they learn at home. And since the percentage of faith-based affiliation is decreasing dramatically, this source of moral guidance will soon be without influence at all. That is why I believe it is so important in our discussion on teaching our children that we include a dialogue regarding what is acceptable behavior and what is not, to include the value of reaching beyond one person's selfish needs and begin to teach them to accept a responsible role in making things better for the greater community. When we speak of the needs of the children, we must include their physical needs. All that goes into creating a healthy learning environment for them. But for us to break the vicious cycle of poverty, street violence, all of the ways in which our children are currently gaining their moral training, I think we must include the simple basic rules of proper social behavior as a starting point. We can leave it up to the local religious leaders to augment these basic rules from their faith-based traditions. However, before I'm misunderstood, I do not mean to limit this discussion to the underprivileged. We must include all of our children, privileged or not. Proper behavior is a moral imperative incumbent upon each and every one of us. It is not an obligation for some and an option for others. Well, every time one of the rabbis or I bring a new child into our extended Jewish family through a naming ceremony, we include a prayer that says, "Kein yikanes tikanes la Torah u'lechuppah u'lema'asim tovim." So may he or she enter into a life of Torah, to a life of good deeds, and to a marriage worthy of God's blessings. I've always found it interesting that the Hebrew does not speak of creating a Jewish home, a bait. Instead, the word is for the wedding canopy, chuppah. The Jewish house that a bride and a groom create together is not just a house. It is not just a physical structure. In Jewish tradition, we elevate the house, the home, into the realm of the spiritual. Our hopes and prayers for each new child is that they not only will have a roof over their heads, that they will live a life not in poverty, but that they live a life that elevates them higher and closer to heaven, a life that lifts others up as well. So my prayer, my hope for this Shabbat is simply, may we continue to be blessed by God with goodness and health. May we reach out to others in need, and continue to be the role models our children need for us to be. And may we continue to teach our children that to elevate just one person, it is as if they have saved an entire world. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos.